Welcome back to History Center. Last week I showed you the first installment of a field piece produced by students from the University of Oklahoma. We were introduced to historic Fort Sill and its museum director, Tawana Spivey. This week we continue our tour at the post headquarters, which was built in 1870 and is still being used to this day. This is the original room and it's still being used.
Exactly, and today is being used for the museum headquarters, previously the post headquarters. A lot of business took place in this building. Here's one of the things I wanted to point out to you. This is a watercolor done by a soldier here at Fort Sill in 1876. A bird's eye view of the post as it looked.
You know, it's interesting, when I look at this, I grew up watching Western movies and F Troop, and I have this image of forts in the West. They're like these medieval castles made of wood. But there's no perimeter here. There's just trees around here. There's no protection. I mean, Indians could have easily have ridden horses right onto the parade grounds.
Well, that's exactly correct, but you seldom ever see a wall or any kind of substantial barrier around a permanent fort. Maybe a small temporary fort, but definitely not a large permanent fort.
So that's a Hollywood creation.
It is, most definitely. The buildings themselves are looked upon as the defense barrier. Let me show you something else here in this building. This is the original court-martial table that was here in the early 1870s, and in fact was used for a court-martial in 1874 when Colonel George Armstrong Custer was here for a court-martial.
It's what, 2 years before he was killed?
2 years before the Little Big Horn.
Fort Sill was established in 1870 to help with the expansion into Native American territory. The fort played a key role in the Red River Campaign against the Comanches, Kiowas, and Southern Cheyenne. Today, Fort Sill remains the only active Army installation of all the forts on the Southern Plains built during the Indian Wars. So this is the original barracks building where the soldiers would have lived?
Exactly. Let me show you inside the 1870 Cavalry Barracks here.
So this is where the regular soldiers would live?
Yes, it is. The company or squad, as it might have been referred to, slept in this large room.
Now, how many soldiers would you have in a room this size? How many soldiers would you have with you?
Might range from 30 to 60 to even as many as 100.
This is sort of what a standard bunk would look like in what, around 1870?
This is the 1871 iron bunk, the first single iron bunk in the Army, emerald green, the original color. And this had an impact on the size of the company.
And these are these canvas bags here?
Yes, these were what were called bed bags, not mattresses. We interpret the period 1875, so these bags were filled with straw, and they didn't adopt mattresses until 1878.
Now, when I go to bed, I usually have a bottle of water near their bed. I see they have something a little bit different.
Yes. Their weapons were kept close at hand. They would need them very quickly. This is the 1865 Spencer carbine, 7-shot repeater, and a favorite of the soldiers on the frontier and also the Indians. So a lot of the Indians picked these up in trades or as battle trophies.
So in addition to all the soldiers who lived here at Fort Sill, you had a very famous Indian prisoner.
I assume you mean Geronimo, a famous Chiricahua Apache prisoner of war here. Yes. He was kept here a little time in the guardhouse, then moved out on the range to a farm and is buried in the Apache POW cemetery near here.
It's not far from here?
Not far.
Can we go take a look at
Sure,
the
it's
grave
not
site?
far at all.
Okay. So this is the grave of Geronimo?
Yes, Geronimo died in 1909 here at Fort Sill and was interred here in this Apache prisoner of war cemetery, and this stone marker erected over his grave.
Why is he historically significant? What should people know about Geronimo?
Well, he was a very famous person, even in his own time. He became a legend, well known. By some accounts, depending on who you were, you might see him as a terrorist. You might see him as a great patriot, but I think there's no doubt by today's standards that he was indeed a great American.
He didn't surrender until, what, 1886?
He surrendered in 1886 and had to go through the reservation period, if you will, What we see happening with the Army and the tribes is the fact that that warrior tradition that was so strong in the 19th century came to an end with the beginning of the reservation period, and the cultures began to collapse inward and deteriorate as a result. But the military actually became the resurrection of that warrior tradition once the tribes realized they could still maintain those values and the warrior tradition through the Army.
Well, it's only appropriate then that we began our discussion today at Fort Sill and ended it here at the gravesite of a great Native American warrior. Twana Spivey, thank you for showing us around today.
Appreciate you being here. Come back again anytime.
I'm used to seeing my students in the classroom. It was really a lot of fun working with them on that piece. And as always, I'd like to remind you to voice your opinion about today's show by logging on to history.com and taking our History Center poll. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute.
Coming up next.
For the History Channel, I'm Steve Gillen. Thanks for watching.